Most mothers want to hear their child's first words, but my mother wanted to hear me stop breathing. She turned our home into a silent tomb and forced me into a point system where I had to trade my voice for a plate of food. If I accidentally chewed too loud, I didn't eat for 48 hours. I wasn't her child. I was a noise she was trying to delete. I grew up in a house that felt like a giant ear. My mom told everyone she had a sickness called misophonia. She said sounds hurt her brain, but looking back I know the truth. She didn't hate sound, she just hated me. She wanted to own every part of me, even the air coming out of my lungs. By the time I was 9 years old, I wasn't allowed to be a kid. I couldn't run. I couldn't laugh. I couldn't even sigh. Mom made a big chart and put it on the fridge. She called it the quiet point system. If you are good and quiet, you get points, she told me with a cold smile. Points buy you dinner. No points, no food. Every day was a nightmare. I would sit on my bed for hours trying not to move. If my knee popped, I lost a point. If I breathed too heavy while I slept, she would bang on my door and scream. "You're doing it on purpose," she would yell. "You're trying to hurt me with your noise." One night, I was so hungry my stomach felt like it was folding in half. I sneaked into the kitchen to get a cracker. I was so careful. I walked on my tiptoes, but then I took a bite. Crunch. The light snapped on. Mom was standing there. Her eyes were wide and scary. "That sound," she whispered. It felt like a knife in my head. She took the box of crackers and threw them in the trash. Then she took a red pen and drew a big X on the chart. "No food for 2 days," she said. "Maybe then you will learn to respect my ears." I went back to my room and cried, but I had to cry into my pillow so she wouldn't hear me. I was starving, but I was more scared than hungry. I felt like a ghost in my own house. At school it was different, but also worse. Mom told my teachers I had brain problems. She said I had something called oppositional defiant disorder. She told them I was a liar and that I liked to make noise just to be mean to her. Because she was so sweet to the teachers and volunteered for every bake sale, they believed her. They didn't see the girl who was fading away. They saw a brave mom dealing with a bad kid. When I was 10, things got even weirder. Mom bought me these huge heavy headphones. They were noise canceling. She made me wear them all the time at home. She played white noise in them so loud it made my head spin. "This is so you don't hear me," she said, "and so I don't have to hear you." I lived in a bubble of static. I couldn't hear the birds outside. I couldn't hear the TV. I couldn't hear my own heart. I felt like I was underwater. Sometimes she would walk up behind me and pull the headphones off just to see me jump. Then she would take points away for reacting too loudly. One day at school I couldn't take it anymore. We were in gym class and we had to run. I hadn't eaten in 2 days because I had coughed during dinner on Tuesday. Everything started to go dark. The walls started to tilt. I tried to grab a chair, but my hands felt like jelly. I hit the floor hard. When I woke up, I was in the nurse's office. The nurse, Mrs. Miller, was looking at me with a worried face. "Honey, when was the last time you ate?" she asked. I looked at the door. I was so scared Mom would walk in. I leaned in and whispered, "I don't have enough points for food." I made a noise. Mrs. Miller blinked. "Points? What are you talking about?" I started to tell her. I told her about the chart, the headphones, and how I had to be a ghost. I thought this was it. I thought someone was finally going to save me. Mrs. Miller looked like she was going to cry. She promised to call someone who could help, but Mom was smarter than everyone. An hour later, Mom arrived at the school. She wasn't angry. She looked sad. She had a folder full of papers. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Miller," Mom said, wiping a fake tear from her eye. "My daughter has a very bad eating disorder. It's part of her sensory issues. We're working with a doctor, but she makes up these stories about points because she's mad that I make her eat healthy food." She showed the nurse a letter from a man named Dr. Klaus. It said I was a compulsive liar and that I needed strict silence to keep my brain from getting overwhelmed. Mrs. Miller looked at the papers, then at me. I wanted to scream, "She's lying. Look at how skinny I am." I was too weak. Mom took me home. As soon as the front door closed, her face changed. The sad Mom was gone. Her face turned into stone. "You tried to tell," she whispered. Her voice was lower and scarier than I had ever heard it. She didn't take me to my room. She led me to the basement. I had never been allowed in the basement before. In the corner there was a new door. It was thick and heavy like the door to a big freezer. "Since you can't be quiet in the house," Mom said, "you can stay in here. It's soundproof. No one can hear you and you can't hurt me with your disgusting noises." She pushed me inside. It was a tiny closet. There were foam pads on all the walls. There was no window, just a single light bulb and a bucket in the corner. "This is your new room," she said. "It's for your therapy." The heavy door slammed shut. I heard the lock click. It was so quiet I could hear my own blood pumping in my ears. I screamed as loud as I could just to hear something, but the walls swallowed my voice. I stayed in that dark hole for a long time. I didn't know if it was day or night. I was so alone. I thought I was going to die in that silent box and no one would ever know I was there. But then, a few days later, she let me out to go back to school. She had to. If I missed too much school, people would ask questions. She put a fresh shirt on me and brushed my hair. "If you say one word about the basement," she said, "you will never come out again. Do you understand?" I nodded. I couldn't speak anyway. My throat felt tight like it was closing up. When I got to school, I sat at my desk and stared at the floor. I felt like a zombie. My regular teacher was sick, and there was a new lady at the front of the room. Her name was Miss CB. She was young and had bright, kind eyes. She didn't look at me like I was a bad kid. She looked at me like she saw a person. I wanted to tell her, but I knew Mom was probably watching. Mom had started volunteering in the school office just to keep an eye on me. I looked at my desk. I couldn't use my voice, but I remembered something my grandpa had shown me a long time ago. A way to talk without making a sound that anyone would notice. I put my hand on the wooden desk. Very softly, I started to tap. Tap, tap, tap. I was tapping in Morse code. I kept doing it over and over. I didn't think anyone would notice. It was such a small sound. But suddenly Miss CB stopped talking. She looked right at me. She didn't look mad. She looked surprised. She walked over to my desk and leaned down. She didn't say anything out loud. She just took a pen and tapped back on the corner of my desk. Tap, tap. My heart nearly stopped. She knew the code. I tapped again, my fingers shaking. I tapped the most important word I knew. Miss CB's face went pale. She looked toward the classroom door, then back at me. She knew I was in trouble, but she didn't know how big the danger really was. I looked up at her, and for the first time in years, I felt a tiny spark of hope. But then I saw my mother standing in the doorway of the classroom, watching us with a cold, sharp smile. I looked up at Miss CB, and for the first time in years, I felt a tiny spark of hope. But then I saw my mother standing in the doorway of the classroom, watching us with a cold, sharp smile. She was holding a stack of papers and wearing her nice mom's sweater. My heart dropped into my stomach. My fingers stopped tapping immediately. "Is everything okay in here?" Mom asked. Her voice was like honey, but I knew it was poison. "I just brought some extra medical files for the office. I saw you talking to my daughter." Miss CB stood up straight. She looked at me, then at my mom. "We were just working on a lesson," Miss CB said. She was trying to act normal, but I saw her hand grip her pen a little tighter. Mom walked over and put her hand on my shoulder. Her nails dug into my skin just a little bit. It was a warning. "She's a sweet girl, but she gets confused," Mom said to Miss CB. "Her doctors say she hallucinates. She says things that aren't true because of her brain problems. It's so sad." I wanted to scream that it was a lie. I wanted to show Miss CB the red marks on my arms from where Mom grabbed me. But I knew what happened to kids who talked. They went back into the soundproof box in the basement. They went back to the silent tomb. "I see," Miss CB said quietly. She didn't look away from my mom's eyes. "I'll keep that in mind." Mom led me out of the classroom for a doctor's appointment. That wasn't real. As soon as we were in the car, the smile disappeared. She didn't say a word. She just handed me the big noise-canceling headphones. I put them on and the loud hiss of the white noise filled my ears. It was so loud it hurt, but I didn't dare take them off. When we got home, Mom didn't give me dinner. She didn't even give me water. She pointed to the basement door. I walked down the stairs and she locked me in the soundproof closet. I sat in the dark. The walls were covered in thick gray foam. It was so quiet I could hear the sound of my own blinking. I started to wonder if I was real. If I didn't make a sound and no one saw me, did I even exist? I thought about the word I tapped to Miss CB. Chibi. Maybe she didn't understand. Maybe she thought it was a game. The next day, Mom took me to see Dr. Klaus. His office smelled like old books and cigarettes. He was a small man with glasses that made his eyes look huge. Mom told me he was the only one who could fix my noisy brain. "She tried to lie to a teacher yesterday, doctor," Mom said. She sounded like she was going to cry. "She told her I don't feed her. I'm so worried about her head." Dr. Klaus nodded. He didn't even look at me. He just started typing on his computer. "Don't worry," he said. "I have the papers ready. We can say her oppositional defiant disorder is getting worse. If she keeps lying, we might have to send her to Peaceful Meadows." My blood ran cold. I had heard Mom talk about Peaceful Meadows on the phone. She said it was a place for broken kids. A place where they stayed behind tall fences and didn't come home for a long time. "I think that's best," Mom said. "She's becoming too loud for me to handle." Dr. Klaus handed her a paper. It was a medical form. I saw my name at the top. It was full of words like unstable and dangerous. It was all a big trick. They were writing a story about a crazy girl so that no one would listen to the real me. When we got back to school a few days later, I felt like a ghost walking through the halls. I saw Miss CB in the hallway. She was talking to the school counselor, Mrs. Henderson. When they saw me, they stopped talking. Mrs. Henderson called me into her office. Mom tried to follow me in, but Mrs. Henderson smiled and said, "Oh, this is just a quick talk about her grades, Mrs. Miller. It's school policy. Just 5 minutes." Mom looked angry, but she couldn't say no without looking looking suspicious. She sat in the waiting room staring at the door. Inside the office, Miss CB was waiting. She knelt down so she was at my eye level. "I heard what your mom said," Miss CB whispered, "but I don't believe her. I saw your face when you tapped that code." Mrs. Henderson leaned in too. "We looked at your medical files, honey. They look strange. Dr. Klaus has a lot of complaints against him, and we found something else." Miss CB pulled out an old newspaper clipping. It was from a different town many miles away. There was a picture of a little boy with curly hair. "His name was Marcus," Miss CB said. "Your mom was his foster mother 10 years ago. She told the police he ran away because he was disturbed. But the neighbors said they never heard him make a single sound. Just like you." I felt a chill go down my spine. I wasn't the first one. There was a boy before me. Marcus, where was he? Did he ever get out of his silent box? "We are going to find out what happened to him," Mrs. Henderson said. "And we are going to get you out of that house. But you have to be very brave for a little longer. Can you do that?" I nodded, my eyes filling with tears. For the first time I wasn't alone. But as I walked out of the office, I saw Mom standing there. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the newspaper clipping that Miss CB was trying to hide under a folder. Mom's face went white, then red. She knew they were digging. She knew her secret about Marcus was coming out. He grabbed my hand so hard I thought my bones would snap. She didn't say goodbye to the teachers. She dragged me toward the exit. "We're leaving," Mom hissed. "We're going to Peaceful Meadows. Right now." I looked back at Miss CB. Her eyes were wide with fear. She tried to reach for me, but Mom pushed through the doors and threw me into the car. Mom started the engine and drove faster than she ever had before. She wasn't heading toward the hospital. She was heading toward the woods. "No more sounds," Mom screamed, and she wasn't pretending to be nice anymore. "No more teachers. No more lies. If you want to be a ghost so bad, I'll make sure you stay one forever." She reached into her bag and pulled out a roll of heavy silver tape. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. She steered the car off the main road and onto a dark, bumpy dirt path where the trees were so thick they blocked out the sun. She steered the car off the main road and onto a dark, bumpy dirt path where the trees were so thick they blocked out the sun. I huddled against the door, my heart beating so fast it felt like it would burst out of my chest. Mom was driving with one hand, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. With her other hand, she held that roll of silver tape. "You think you're so smart," she snarled. "You and that teacher. You think you can talk behind my back?" I didn't answer. I knew that any sound, a sob, a plea, a breath, would only make it worse. But for the first time in my life, my silence didn't feel like a choice. It felt like I was already dead. "We aren't going to Peaceful Meadows," she said, her voice turning eerily calm. "That place is too public. They ask too many questions. No, we're going to a special place Dr. Klaus told me about. A place where noisy children go to be forgotten." I looked out the window at the passing trees. I kept thinking about Marcus, the boy from the newspaper. He was a noisy child too. Had she taken him to this same dark woods? Had he sat in this same seat, shaking and cold? I realized then that my mother didn't have a sickness. She didn't have sound pain. She just liked the power of making people disappear. Suddenly, she slammed on the brakes. The car skidded on the gravel and stopped in front of a small, gray building. It didn't have any signs. Looked like a warehouse for broken things. "Get out," she ordered. She dragged me toward the door. A man in a white coat was waiting there. He didn't look like a doctor. He looked like a guard. "This is the one?" the man asked. "Yes," Mom said. She handed him a thick envelope full of cash. "No insurance, no names, just money. She's very loud. She needs the deep isolation. Don't let her use her voice for anything." The man grabbed my arm. His grip was like iron. "Don't worry, Mrs. Miller. In here, no one hears anything." They led me down a long white hallway. There were no windows. I could hear other sounds now. Muffled crying from behind heavy doors, the sound of static playing through speakers in the ceiling. It was like my basement, but 100 times bigger. The man opened a door to a tiny room. It had a bed with straps and a single light on the ceiling. "Wait." I finally found my voice. It was scratchy and weak. "Please, my name is..." The man pushed me onto the bed and covered my mouth with a piece of that silver tape. The sound of the tape peeling off the roll, rip, was the loudest, scariest thing I had ever heard. "Quiet," he said. "Your mother says you're sick. We're here to help you be still." He walked out and locked the door. I was back in the silence. But this time, I knew no one was coming to get me for school in the morning. I was in a place where people were paid to help my mother hide her crimes. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at my hands. I thought about Miss CB. I thought about the Morse code. Tap, tap. I started to tap on the metal leg of the bed. It made a sharp, ringing sound. Clang, 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 clang. I didn't care about points anymore. I didn't care about food. I wanted to make the biggest noise in the world. I wanted to scream so loud the walls would crack. But I knew I had to be smart. I looked around the room. There was a small vent near the floor. I crawled over to it. If I couldn't get out, maybe I could send a signal. I took off one of my shoes and started banging it against the metal vent. Over and over. Rhythmic, loud. Hee-hees. Hours passed. My arm ached. My head hurt from the white noise hum in the room. I felt like giving up. Maybe Mom was right. Maybe I was just a noise that needed to be deleted. Then I heard something. It wasn't the static. It wasn't the crying. It was a siren, far away but getting closer. Then I heard a voice over a loudspeaker. "This is the police. Open the doors immediately." My heart leaped. Had Miss CB found me? How? The door to my room flew open. It wasn't the man in the white coat. It was a police officer in a blue uniform, and right behind him was Mrs. Henderson, the school counselor. "There she is," Mrs. Henderson cried. She ran to me and pulled the tape off my mouth. It hurt, but I didn't care. I hugged her so hard I thought I'd never let go. "We tracked the car," the officer said, "and we found the records Dr. Klaus was trying to burn. It's over, kiddo. You're safe." As they led me out of that horrible building, I saw my mother. She was in handcuffs next to a police car. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't crying. She was just staring at me with those cold, empty eyes. "You were always too loud," she hissed as I walked past. I stopped. I looked her right in the face. For the first time in my life, I wasn't shaking. "I'm just getting started," I said. They put me in a separate car. Miss CB was waiting there. She grabbed my hand. "We found Marcus," she whispered. "He's alive. He's in a home 3 towns over. He told us everything." I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. I wasn't just saving myself. I had helped save the boy who came before me. But as the police car started to drive away, I saw Dr. Klaus sneaking out of a back exit of the warehouse. He had a briefcase in his hand and he was running toward the trees. I pointed out the window and tried to shout, but my voice gave out, and I realized he was heading straight for the only road the police hadn't blocked yet. I pointed out the window and tried to shout, but my voice gave out, and I realized he was heading straight for the only road the police hadn't blocked yet. Dr. Klaus was running with his briefcase, trying to disappear into the tall grass. "There," I finally managed to squeak out, pointing my shaking finger. The police officer saw him. He grabbed his radio and called it in. Within seconds, 2 more police cars raced toward the trees, their sirens screaming. It was the most beautiful noise I had ever heard. They caught him just before he reached his car. They slammed him against the hood and put the cuffs on him. He wasn't a scary doctor anymore. He was just a small, mean man in a wrinkled coat. The next few months were a blur of voices. For so long I was scared of every sound. But now people were asking me to speak. Lawyers, police, and kind doctors wanted to know my story. They found out that Dr. Klaus had been taking money from parents like my mom for years to help them hide their secrets. When the trial happened, I had to stand up in a big room. I saw my mother sitting there. She tried to give me that scary, cold look again, but it didn't work. I wasn't her noise anymore. I was a person. The judge listened to everything. He saw the point system chart. He saw the photos of the closet in the basement. He heard about Marcus, the boy who almost didn't make it out. The judge looked at my mom and Dr. Klaus. He didn't smile. "You used medicine as a weapon," the judge said to the doctor. "You will spend 30 years in prison." Then he looked at my mother. "And you tried to erase a child because you wanted control. You never had a sickness. You only had a cruel heart." Mom got 25 years. When they led her away, she looked small. She didn't look like a monster anymore. She just looked like a very lonely woman who had lost everything. I didn't go back to that house. I went to live with my Aunt Sarah. She is the opposite of my mother. Her house is full of noise. She has a dog that barks at the mailman. She plays music while she cooks. The first morning I was there, I sat at the breakfast table. I was so used to being quiet that I didn't want to move. I picked up a piece of toast and looked at it. I was terrified to take a bite. "Go ahead, sweetie," Aunt Sarah said. She was smiling. I took a bite. Crunch. I froze. I waited for someone to yell. I waited for someone to take my points away. I waited for the dark closet. But Aunt Sarah just laughed. "Is it good? Do you want some jam with that?" I started to cry. I cried and I made noise. I sobbed loudly, and for the first time no one told me to stop. Aunt Sarah just held me until I was finished. Now I am in middle school. I'm not the quiet girl in the back anymore. I joined the school choir. Every Tuesday and Thursday I stand on a stage and I sing as loud as I can. I also joined the drama club. I love being on stage because I get to use my voice to tell stories. I even met Marcus. He is older now, but he has the same look in his eyes that I used to have. We don't talk much about the past, but we sit together sometimes. We just enjoy the fact that we can talk whenever we want. I found out the biggest secret of all. My mom never had misophonia. The doctors found out she just used that as an excuse to be a bully. She wanted the world to be silent so she could be the only one heard. Sometimes, when I'm alone, I think about that little girl in the basement. I think about how I used to be ashamed of being loud. I used to think my greatest achievement was going a whole week without making a sound. I'm ashamed of that now. I'm ashamed that I tried to disappear just to make her happy. But I'm not that girl anymore. I am loud. I am messy. I am full of life. And I will never ever be quiet again.